Hello, I'm so excited to have you all join us tonight. And I'm so excited to have Tracy Proffitt and Danielle Brown, both of whom I've been lucky enough to work with in the past, join us because they are the math experts and I'm just sitting here taking it all in. So let me bring forward Tracy and Danielle. Thank you guys for joining and taking the time to speak to us all. And I'm so excited to learn from you. So my background is in special education. And so as a special education teacher, I am always pushing into different content. And, it's really popular that we get pushed into math and English, especially since those are the heavily tested, state tested subjects. And I feel like I've gotten to know the curriculum a lot, but I don't always know best practices as how they align to math. So I know the content and I know the standards, but I don't know the best ways to teach it. And so that's why I really wanted to bring my math people forward to selfishly just teach me. And so, for special ed, I always have we focus on motivation and collaboration, and we oftentimes have goals that go with practice and repetition or behavior goals or socio-emotional goals. And I thought what better way to talk about math and special ed in this context of the games in the math classroom, because I thought you guys would be the experts and then I could walk away with some best practices to really drive home some of these goals and practice some of my goals. So I know we've got some math people here joining us tonight. So please, if you have any questions or highlights, put them in the chat and we will get to them. Thank you for joining us live here tonight. And then I'm going to step back and I'm going to let you two take it away. So Tracy, why don't you start off just introducing yourself and then we'll pass it over to Danielle.
Thanks so much for inviting me to just get to do this with two of my most favorite people. Is super exciting. But I'm Tracy Proffitt. I've worked in Lynchburg City Schools and Montgomery County Schools, and right now I am pursuing my PhD at Virginia Tech.
And I'm Danielle Brown. I currently teach in Salem City Schools. I have always been a middle school math educator, but I overlapped in Lynchburg City Schools, taught abroad, and then worked in Roanoke City as well. I'm so excited to be here too.
Great. So I'm going to step backstage, but Danielle, I'm going to let you take it over and just, I kind of went over my why I got excited and I didn't click onto the next slide. So why don't you take over some of the math games that you incorporate into the middle school classroom?
Perfect. So I am a pretty competitive person by nature. So anything that can be turned into a game or something that I can win always makes me feel a little bit more excited. So trying to make that into the math classroom, in my opinion, kind of disguises learning. So the kids kind of forget that they're practicing the same questions over and over again because they're kind of distracted by the fun of it. So I pulled together some of my favorite game ideas and resources. A lot of these that I love are no prep or very minimal prep because there's so many other things on our plates that I like to make it just something I can throw in if I see the inspiration of the day. So I am a very big supporter of doing small groups. So some games that's worked really well for that are the game Spoons. So I have some cards that I've cut out on cardstock, but these ones can be used. A big topic for us is anything with fractions in 6th grade math. So we use the same cards for equivalent fraction, ordering fraction decimal percents, converting fraction decimal percents. So this one batch of cards can be used for so many different things, which I really like. Another game that we've used is, even though we're middle school, we still miss some foundational math concepts with a lot of our kids. So there's a game called Quicks, which is a dice game, and they're trying to fill up their game cards, but it's all addition practice. But that is a really fun game that if you teach them in a small group setting with you, you can then use small groups and rotations activities for them to play independently in small groups by themselves while you work on a different skill that you need other kids for. So teaching them these games lets you throw it in a rotation every once in a while to keep it fresh. And so Quicks is a really good game. And if you laminate like 5 of the game cards, that last you for multiple years instead of buying replacements over and over again. Another thing is cheap. I love things that are cheap. So the Dollar Tree has little game kits, and they are miniature Connect 4s. There's a picture of them there. They fit perfectly in those little Michaels photo storage containers that fit in the little like photo album that you can get on sale. So those would be really awesome that I would just, if I had them working, I would pick up one of those containers and another container that had task cards, flashcards, or cut up questions, and they could play with that game. That in order to put the chip in, you have to get a question right, and they'd have an answer key to check themselves. So that was always an activity that I liked, and that could be using any worksheet practice that you already had and just disguising it that they can work together, communicate, laugh while they're doing the same math they were going to do anyways. Another one that I love doing is level slips. The CUDA software has all those worksheets you can Google and find that are like 1 through 24 of just repetition type problems. And if you cut up those slips, they're already numbered like questions, but you tell the kids they're levels. Everyone's starting on level 1, dig around and find level 1. And then they solve it, you check it. And so then they move on to level 2. While that's happening in a small group, you can also be working with this kid who's stuck on level 2, question 2, until they can get it. And they're so busy trying to dig through a shuffle of questions that they're not really paying attention as much to, I'm 7 levels behind them and I'm 5 levels ahead of you, because they're just competing against themselves. And that's something that's really fun, but it's also low prep. Like that takes 2 seconds to just cut up your questions and jazz it up. So that's always a really fun game that I've enjoyed doing. The last one for small groups would be board games. If you download just like a game template by Googling, Chutes and Ladders, there's blank boards that you can use in like little eraser caps are the game pieces. Dice could be in those little salad containers to shake, or you can use like the little paper spinners. So if you just put all that in a little baggie, that's a game already ready with any questions you have. That is really fun for them to play in small groups, whether with you or by themselves, where they're still practicing, where you have one student who's responsible for the answer key and keeping everyone on track of, you have to do the math before you play, but it kind of breaks it up a little bit to check themselves. So those have always been really successful in the middle school classrooms that I've been in. A lot of these games use questions that you already have. Any worksheet or online printout that you find can be used. Those CUDA software questions are great, or other worksheets, but those ones are just formatted really well for clean cuts. And anything like spinners and dice can make any question set into a game. I think it was 2 days ago, we took a worksheet that was like fraction, decimal, percents, a chart, models and impropers and percents, and they had just conversions. This would have been dry and boring, but we pulled out just the dice and they had to spin the dice to figure out which question. If you rolled the same number, you can't do it. You have to spin it again. We'll shake the dice. And my kids were working. It was really fun, but they were practicing fraction, decimal, percents and trying to win. But really, they were just trying to do more questions that I wanted them to do. And Teachers Pay Teachers and Google have lots of templates for games. And even if the games don't have set rules, like when I first started playing games, I was like, I have to take the time to teach them how to play Chutes and Ladders or Candyland. But you don't. You get a random game board, and then you tell them you have 2 minutes to decide whatever rules you want to play by. If you spin a 7, do you go forward 20 and you won? Or like maybe if you roll a dice after you do this, you get a special thing. So they kind of make their own rules themselves. So one game board can create a million different games because they just change the rules every time and establish them at the beginning. So that makes it so I don't have to keep making up new games. They kind of do that step for me. So that is a little bit about that. And now we can change the slide. So the next part is whole group games. So these are great for reviews or anything that you have everyone for. Again, competition really helps me buy in, but this first game is called Castles. and you start to see alliances form. You start to see like, please don't attack me. Remember, like I held the door open for you 2 days ago. And they start like bringing in stuff from outside the classroom. It's real funny. So that first game is called Castles. It is not content specific. You can use it for any question set, any class you want. So every team, they're split up into teams. Every team starts off with a predetermined amount of X's. Your choice. I like to start with 3 or 5. Then as they answer questions, they get 2 attacks or 1 life reviving. So if my team got the question right, I would then get the choice to attack the second team. And I'll say, I want to attack them twice. They've now lost 2 of their lives. So then you go around, every question has people to answer. But once someone loses all their lives, you wait till this point and then you tell them, so you're out. That's so sad. But now you can make sure that the people who got you out, that they don't win either. You're still in the game. And so like revenge is sweet. It's really fun. But they didn't know that little twist a little bit later. The reason why it's castles is you give them a second to draw castles on the board. It has nothing. So like I've done castles and then like the next time we played, I'm like, we're going to play race cars. And instead of drawing castles, they drew race cars. And then this time we're going to play airplanes and they drew airplanes. Like you just change it up and they think it's a completely new game, but it's the same thing. So that's a really fun game. Another game is called Zap. So when you get this slideshow, that one's actually QR coded. I love this game. It's a whole class game. And I love games where the smartest team doesn't win, because oftentimes when you do whole class games, even if they're random teams, kids are like, oh, I can't win because I don't know this. And that kid over there knows everything. But Zap, there was a lot of chance in the game. So even if you don't know every question, you don't know what the Zap cards are. Some of them are good for your team, like add 10 points. Some of them are bad for your team, like lose 20 points. Some of them are bad for others. You might draw a card that says, take 20 points from another team. So after you answer every question, you have the choice to take a risk with a Zap card. If you pull a Zap, you lose all your points. If you pull a Zap all teams, everyone loses all their points. So my favorite time playing this was the last card pulled was a Zap all teams, like right before the bell. So every team was competing and then all of a sudden everyone has 0 goodbye. You tried. So it's a really fun game that keeps everyone on the edge of their seats. Wheel of Names is great for when you're doing these whole class games that every team has to answer the question. And then you spin the wheel to see who has to answer it. Because if team A already knows it's their turn before the question starts, they're the only ones who are really like doing the question. But if everyone knows that it could be any of us, everyone's doing every single question. So I do love Wheel of Names to kind of like put more suspense into who's going to get picked. And lastly is the hat, like the basketball hats or darts. The basketball hats, I think I got on Amazon, maybe 3 for like $16. But they're little nets and you throw ping pong balls in them. So like for every 6 questions correct, you get 2 tosses and that's some extra points. If you want to do it free, crumbled up paper into a trash can is trash get ball, but they do like wearing the hat and like actually trying to catch the ball as it's being thrown at them, as well as Velcro darts. IKEA is the one that I got mine from, which is really fun to just throw in for any assignment or anything that you're doing already or lesson or guided practice. You just say, all right, this question is going to be a darts question. So work really hard. That way you can throw the darts. And it's fun ways to have more fun and engagement. So that way they don't realize how much they're working hard.
Yeah, I love that. And the Wheel of Names is so simple. And I've never thought of that before. Just have everyone answer the question. You have, however long to answer it and then decide what team is going to get those points. Like, how simple is that? And yet I've never even considered it. And I will definitely be using that in any game, in any class from now on. So, I mean, they were all great, but that one, I was like, how have I never thought of that before? Now, Danielle, if I am like new to introducing games in math, what do you think would be like, what advice would you give me, or what did you learn after the fact and now you have that 2020 knowledge?
So if I were starting, I would pick 1 or 2 to be staples and then kind of do them every once in a while until you get really good at the rules and how to like manage it. That's something I learned after the fact, because I also am like, ooh, tons of things. Today we'll play this, tomorrow we'll play this. And then the next time we try and pull a game out, they don't remember like what it is or what's happening. So I would say that for a whole group, but with small group is definitely taking the time to teach them what you expect when they're on their own. Because if you don't teach them that piece, the reason why we do it in our group, we're giving that time that we might not have, so it'll pay us back later. But if you don't take that time at the beginning to be like, when you're playing quicks, you actually have to do the math. You have to exit out. You have to move this direction. You're not going backwards. But those kind of like game rules definitely helped in the long run, because then that ended up being a game that we played all year long, just randomly thrown in. But if we didn't give that time at the beginning, I don't know what they're doing. And I would be like, oh, you just spent 20 minutes playing by rolling dice, but you did nothing I wanted you to do. So I think explicitly going over why you're doing it and what you're doing and what it should look like, even when you're not next to them.
Yeah, I remember going into your math class, and I remember at the beginning of the year, the games were really like your small group instruction with the kids. Like, and when they were on their own, they were like, it was a blended learning activity, like a worksheet or, some kind of the division software, like we use IXL, like doing that kind of stuff. And when they were with you, they were playing the game. But then I remember like coming in the spring.
Yes.
And by then the kids were playing the games independently. And so I guess that's what you're talking about. That's how you kind of transition through.
Yes, I agree.
That's great.
And I'll also add Prodigy. I've used it like iffy in the past, but this year I'm actually really using it. My kids, I have a kid who wouldn't really do as much math on his own. The kid has like 300 questions correct for just this week. And I'm like, whoa. He was like, I was up at 4 a.m. and I got on Prodigy. And I was like, wow. So that's also another game, but more on a techie side that I'm starting to throw in a little bit more. That's been really cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And I think we're going over now kind of like how more of the like Tracy's my research, my best practices person, like how can this really impact and how can we make the biggest impact with games? So we know that like we all like playing games. We all like to be competitive, but how can I be sure that I'm making a good game for math? And so that's really also where Tracy's expertise comes in here for this.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. I do want to say, Danielle, I loved the idea of giving them a game board and letting them come up with the game. I had not thought of that before, and I think that's super fun. And kids are great. They would make up better games than we would, right? So this is one of the best tools that I have found for thinking about what makes a good game for the math class. And when I'm coming at that from the elementary point of view, and I'm thinking not only games where we can like practice the math, like can we get this type of question right or wrong, but like can we learn new math from some of these games that we're playing? So there's a lot of times where you can use the game to introduce a concept. So this list of 10 questions to guide game selection came from one of my favorite books that's there in purple, Math Fact Fluency. And this is by Jennifer Bay Williams and Gina Kling. And if you are at all in the addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, fluency, needing that, then this is one of the books that you need. I've read it multiple times. But they give this list of questions that you can ask yourself about a game that you might have found to see if it is going to be a quality choice. So their list is specifically for working on math facts. So I took that list and edited a little bit, and that's on the next slide. You can see that everything is the same language. It's all the same language. The only places that I changed their language are the words in bold. So everything else comes straight from Bay Williams and Kling. But as we can see, the first one, if a game, not only if a game can help you practice, but maybe it would introduce a standard or explore a standard. I think number 2, Danielle's certainly had age appeal for all the things that she mentioned. 3 is employing visuals or models. In elementary school, that might look like 10 frames or arrays or all kinds of things. 4, I feel like multiple strategies, that is really somewhat of a specific one for math fact strategies. 5, maybe you want to see if your game has an opportunity to have discussion. Like a lot of times that can be around, oh, you made this choice. Why did you make that particular choice? The encourage individual accountability. And I was thinking when you mentioned the wheel of names, that does add some accountability because everybody's answering the question, ahead of time. But there's also sometimes that we have to check or sometimes that we have to record, all those kinds of things. 7 and 8 are probably my biggest. Removing time pressures, I think is so important in math. I feel like our culture gives us the idea that you're good at math if you are fast at math, and that is just wrong. And math is about being fluent, and math is about being efficient, and math is about being flexible, but it's not about being quick. Uh, I remember loving Around the World in math class as a kid because I could be fast at facts, but that is like devastating to some kids to be constantly put behind this time pressure. So I have 99% of the time removed any kind of time pressures from games that I'm playing in the math class because I don't want kids to get that idea. And then the 8 is adding in some sort of logic or strategy to where the game is not just a luck game, but also has some sort of strategy. That ups the ante a ton. And then offers opportunities to adapt, which I think is, in the case of special ed, super important. Games are great if there's a way that you can add a challenge or add a support, all of that. And then number 10 is also very important. Can you use a game that's going to give you an opportunity to watch as a teacher and learn about what your kids know when it comes to the math? So I love this list. And I think, if you find a game, taking a look at this list could be helpful to say, oh yeah, this game meets like 4 or 5 of these things. This is pretty good. Or gosh, this game only meets 1, but can I make a change? Can I up it a little bit by maybe trying to incorporate 2 or 3 of these things? So that actually happened with a game called Bump, and you can take a look at the next slide. This is, and I want to shout out my friend Caitlin Ramsire. She helped me make a much prettier version of Bump. Mine was like literally marker and, on the piece of paper. She made this for me. Thanks, Caitlin. But so this is a game that you might have seen before. It's pretty popular in elementary school. I was playing or intended to play it with +9 facts. So basically, can you add 9 to a number? And one of the strategies is to make a 10. Like, if I'm going to do 9 plus 7, I might kind of move 1 from the 7 over to the 9 and think 10 plus 6. Anyway, so I was needed to practice this set of facts with a student. And the way that you would normally play Bump is you would flip over a card. So Aaron, you can go to the next slide. You would flip over a card and then you would figure out the sum. The sum is 16 and then mark it with the chip. And moving on to the next one, you can see that some gameplay has happened, and then now the green person, so we're playing in partners or against each other, now the green player has also flipped over a 7, so that sum is also 16, and so they get to, here's the fun part, they get to bump the other person off. So they send the purple, they bump them off, and now they've claimed the 16. So the gameplay continues, and the other rule basically that you need to know on the next slide is that if you get 2 chips of the same color on a number, then you've locked that one and you can't be bumped off. So now you see purple has claimed 19, it's theirs. And even if a 10 is flipped over again, they don't get it. That's the game. It's fairly fun. the bump aspect makes it interesting, but like it's all luck, right? There's not that much, there's no strategy involved basically. So I thought about going back to that list from the Math Fact Fluency. How can I maybe add in some strategy and how can I add in models? So this is the updated version of the bump game. And as you can see in the top left, I'm using the same bump board, but I've added another piece of paper. And if you go ahead and click, you would flip over your number and it would, so now we're adding 7, and the first step is the student is going to build 7 with snap cubes. So they've placed it in that 10 frame, and then here's the strategy. They have a choice. Do I want to add that number? Do I want to add 7 to 8, or do I want to add 7 to 9? And it's still working on that strategy of making a 10, but I've given them a choice. And so if you go ahead to the next slide, in the next, this player decided I'm going to add it to 8. And so now you see they've moved 2 from that 7 to make a full 10 frame. So the student would say, oh, I have a full group of 10 down here with the pink and the green together. And I know 10 plus 5 is 15. And we can see that there was already a marker on 15. So I'm thinking that this student made that choice purposely because they're like, if they're green, they want to lock it, or maybe they're purple and they want to bump their person off. So this has added both some strategy, which makes it more interesting, right? And it's added the models where they're actually using the 10 frame, moving it, and then saying, here's 10 and here's 5 more. And I think that having played this with a student, I think that them making the choice of, do I want to add this number to 8 or to 9, would be a pretty hard thing to do just like in your head. But because you can think, okay, I'm going to see what happens when I move 2 over to add it to the 8. Okay, that's going to get me this. And it's really easy to go back, build the 7 back, and then put 1 more down here. Oh, okay, yeah, that's the number that I want. So I think the models actually help you with the strategy in this case. And I'll say one more from that list. It talked about having the ability for it to be different levels. So you may have some students who can still play this, and maybe their partner needs the models, but they're able to play it without the model. So that allows the varying levels to happen there. And I think on the next slide, I just was revisiting that, kind of pointing out that I took a game that is pretty well known, used a lot, and how I tried to bump it up a little bit. Bump. I didn't do that on purpose. How I tried to bump it up a little bit to make it even better.
Yeah, and before we move on to like all your additional ideas and website, I was thinking when you were talking about this, because middle school mind, like I wonder if you could do something like this with expressions. Like I'm trying to think of ideas where you can kind of take this concept where, so just trying to take it, and how could you make a strategy game similar with bump, but obviously we're not going to be using a deck of cards, or we wouldn't be using a deck of cards in the same way. So
Right.
how could we use something else? Because
So
it seems like a very simple, it's like what Danielle was saying, like if you've got a board or like an idea, like maybe, and kids get familiar with it, and maybe they do add the first time they use it, like even at the middle school level, because they're just learning the process of the game, right? They're not learning the idea is the first time, they just need to learn the rules of the game. So then when you change the math, they still know the game.
Yeah.
I have a question or an idea on that. Could it be used for like exponents, and they have like a not a multiplication chart, but almost like a 12 by 12 grid, and to like model, they have to like color it in, but like the exponents change? I don't know, like expanded form and
Yeah.
exponential form. I don't know.
Yeah.
But like instead of like +8 +9, it could be like squared or cubed.
Ooh, yeah.
Oh,
And then it
Somehow
would just
making
have
it
to
so that
be
way.
like, if you rolled a die instead of a card, you could roll one die, and then you'd either be doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 squared, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cubed, and that would be the
And
12
they have to expand
choices.
because that's a hard thing
Yeah.
remember, like expanded form.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be instead of like a 10 frame, like expanded form.
Oh, yeah. The models part. Yeah.
Yeah. Think on that, make it, and then just share it with all of us.
Yes.
All right. Well, Tracy, you've got like a whole site with ideas too.
Yeah, so Caitlin and I recently presented at the Virginia Math Specialist Conference, and I'm always in the process of collecting things, and then I'm like, where was that cool game that I played? Or I used to have a game. So I just decided, in order to make it shareable and so that I could keep track of my own stuff, Caitlin and I put together this site, and there's the link there, but it is organized. I will say it's very heavily elementary, but there is definitely some appropriate sixth grade stuff in there. But it's organized by number sense, like a whole section of number sense broken up by grade levels, and then a whole section of operations, some other stuff. I would really encourage you to check out you can't see it on this slide, but there's a section called more, and it links to maybe like 6 or 8 people who have also put together really, really awesome collections of games. So don't miss out on that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and I'll put this slide deck in the description on the YouTube channel, so everyone can access this and get the hyperlinks to the slides and everything that you guys are sharing here, because I think that's fantastic. And I really liked, Tracy, what you had said. If you guys have games in the classroom, using that checklist to see how many of these criteria do the games I already use. Like maybe I've got great games. Maybe this isn't my focus of change this year, but it's really like ensuring I'm applying as many as I can or that are appropriate to this particular skill or game. And maybe I have one that does have 3, but maybe I'm using this checklist and I say, oh, this 4th one, it would be a simple change. Like I can easily do this by changing this one factor. Or, oh wow, this math game only incorporates one of these. Like let me see how I can like at least make it 2. And so I like that because you have the chance to grow incrementally. It's not a whole lot of pressure, but I need a checklist, again, because like I said, I'm sure I've been playing tons of games that are just fun and they are engaging, but we need to go beyond just engagement, and beyond compliance and make sure. And like you said, like using them to introduce math, so the introduction to some of these skills
Yep.
is fun and engaging, but that we also are measuring the learning outcomes.
Yep. And I think to add to that, not only would really be a whole nother, YouTube, but adding to that, as a teacher, once you've chosen a good game, I think it's really important to think about what kinds of things do you say to the students and ask them as they are playing. And one of the questions that will get you a lot of ground is two. Why did you make that move? Like if there's strategy involved, asking about why'd you decide to do that? And then also, what are you hoping you're going to roll, or what are you going to hope you're going to flip? Like for example, in the bump game, that is taking the game that they're playing and bumping it up just a little bit more because they have to sort of think backwards from what they want. So once you've chosen that really good game, even just have 2 questions ready to go that you're going to ask your students that are going to make them push their thinking just a little bit more. And it helps you learn about what they know too.
Yeah. And I know I'm kind of like Danielle, where I just like run with ideas like, ooh, another flashy thing, another. And you have taught me, just if not directly, indirectly with what you post and what you share, you're like, what do you notice? What do you wonder? Just like really purposeful questions that have a lot of impact, and that you can see great things, instead of me who's like trying to develop 15 questions that are, but I like how you are purposeful in your questions and you come back to them repeatedly. And I will try to be more like you. in that regard, because I think it's great, and I think it has a much greater impact than where my brain would typically go.
Well, yeah, those two questions, what do you notice, what do you wonder, certainly can't take credit for them, but they will also get you a really long way in any math situation, for sure.
Well, thank you both for being here and sharing, and I'll be adding this slide deck to the description on the YouTube channel. It'll be housed on my YouTube channel, so anyone can come back to this. But thank you guys. Are there any final notes or things that we should take away with us this evening?
I would just say thanks for inviting me. I love talking with both of you guys and talking about math, talking about games. And if somebody tries something new, we'd love to hear about it. Shoot us a message on Twitter or somewhere on the internet. I don't know.
And thank you so much for inviting me too. I do love both of your brains. And I think with like games and like Tracy's like intentionality, because I'm like, fun, confetti. But it's like make the time you're using worth it. So I really liked being intentional with game creation. So this was great for me too to learn.
Yeah, a great blend. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you guys for being here.
Yep, thank you. Good night.
Bye.